Imagine walking into the exact same supermarket you've shopped at for years. You grab the exact same stuff, but suddenly your weekly grocery bill is $50 more. Then the rent notice hits, up again. You go to fill up your car, and honestly, the price of fuel just feels punishing. You're not imagining it. These everyday financial shocks are real, and they're hitting households everywhere.
So what does this all mean? We have to ask the central question of our explainer today. Why does everything cost more than it used to? That is the mystery we're unraveling. We need to look past the painful symptoms we feel at the checkout counter and dig straight into the actual, literal economic mechanics driving these changes.
Section 1. Engines of inflation. Okay, let's dive into this. Let's look closely at the very first suspect pushing your costs upward. Economists call this demand pull inflation. Basically, this happens when consumer demand for stuff simply outpaces the available supply. The classic textbook definition is too much money chasing too few goods. Think about it like a brand new tech gadget or a specific car model that everyone suddenly wants, right? But factories can only pump out so many. When buyers are super eager and actually willing to pay more just to skip the line, sellers naturally raise their prices to balance out the market. It's the purest form of supply and demand, and it's acting directly on your wallet.
Now, the second engine comes from the exact opposite direction. This is called cost-push inflation. This one happens on the business side of the equation. Here, prices go up because the actual cost of making goods increases. Picture a local bakery. If the price of wheat spikes because of a terrible drought, or fuel costs surge so delivering the flour is way more expensive, that bakery's operating costs just skyrocket. And you know, businesses rarely just absorb those losses. To survive and keep their profit margins intact, they push those extra costs right onto you, the consumer.
And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. We've got two distinct forces squeezing our wallets. On one side, demand pull is totally consumer-driven. It's our collective desire to buy outstripping what's available. On the other side, cost push is business-driven. The literal mechanical costs of making and moving products get heavier, which forces retail prices up. So they're different engines entirely, but they both arrive at the exact same destination, you paying more.
Section 2. Rockets and feathers.
Now, domestic supply and demand is really only part of the story. A lot of times, the things creating stubbornly high bills at home are actually happening far outside our borders. I'm talking about unpredictable global shocks, sudden energy crises, massive geopolitical conflicts, or extreme weather destroying crops. These things completely disrupt the global flow of goods, and when they hit, they permanently elevate the baseline cost of our absolute bare necessities, things you literally cannot just opt out of buying, like food to eat and fuel to get to work.
And here is the truly frustrating part about these global shocks. According to analysis by the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit, when you look at household staples, prices behave in a very specific, highly asymmetric way. When a crisis hits, prices shoot up rapidly. No surprise there. But when the crisis finally eases and supply chains recover, well, the prices only fall very, very slowly and often only partially.
Economists actually have a pretty great name for this. They call it the rockets and feathers effect. Prices go up like a rocket during a global shock, but they drift back down like a feather. This dynamic perfectly explains why your grocery and utility bills stay painfully high long after the news cycle has moved on from the initial crisis. The shock fades out, but the prices float down agonizingly slowly.
Section 3. The psychology of spending.
So we've talked about supply, production costs, and global crises, but there's a very human element to this puzzle too. In fact, our own mindset might secretly be part of the problem. There's this fascinating concept known as inflationary psychology. Basically, it happens when both businesses and regular consumers start to anticipate that prices are just going to keep going up in the future. Because of that fear, they completely alter their spending behavior today. It's a psychological trap where our mere expectations of the economy actually begin to shape economic reality.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the tragic irony of how this plays out in the real world. Think about it. If you firmly believe a refrigerator, a car, or even your daily staples are going to be way more expensive next month, what do? You rush to buy them today. But when everyone rushes out to buy big-ticket items simultaneously out of fear, it artificially spikes consumer demand. We accidentally trigger that demand pull engine we talked about earlier. By panic buying to avoid inflation, we ironically fuel the exact inflation we're desperately trying to escape.
Section 4. Cooling the economy.
All right, so how do we actually stop this cycle? We obviously need a containment strategy, and thankfully, there are specific institutions built to handle this. To control inflation and literally cool down spending, central banks step in. We're talking about institutions like the Federal Reserve in the US or the Bank of England in the UK.
Their primary weapon to manage rising prices is adjusting monetary policy. They can't exactly force factories to produce more goods, and they sure can't stop extreme weather, but they do hold the ultimate lever over how expensive it is to borrow money.
Let's move to and see how this builds through a very specific domino effect. Step 1. The central bank raises interest rates. Step 2. Higher interest rates mean borrowing costs increase across the board. Mortgages, credit cards, business loans, they all become a lot more expensive to maintain. Step 3. Because borrowing is suddenly so costly, people borrow less and spend less, which naturally means the total amount of money circulating in the economy shrinks. And finally, step 4. With less money chasing those goods, excessive demand cools down and prices begin to stabilize. It's essentially a deliberate braking system pulled by the government to slow down the entire economy.
So, inflation isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's this intricate, heavy machine built of supply chains, global events, and central bank policies. But as we've seen through inflationary psychology, it is also heavily driven by human behavior. Which leaves us with a critical question to consider. If our own expectations and fears actually shape the market, is our own panic our biggest economic threat? It's definitely something to think about the next time you head to the checkout line. Thank you for joining me for this explainer.